สวัสดีครับทุกท่านครับวันนี้เราจะมาฟังกันนะครับว่า Constructionism ในประเทศไทยเนี่ยเป็นอย่างไรจากคนที่มาจากต่างประเทศนะครับเราอาจจะทำ Constructionism กันมานานพอสมควรนะครับมีการแลกเปลี่ยนมีการพูดคุยกันนานแล้วว่า Constructionism นั้นคืออะไรนะครับแต่มันอาจจะมาจากมุมมองของคนข้างในเราได้มีนักวิจัยนะครับที่อยู่ในวงการ Constructionism ในต่างประเทศนะครับสองท่านที่ได้เข้ามาศึกษาดูการทำงานของเราศึกษาดูความคิดของเราในประเทศไทยได้สักพักหนึ่งแล้วฉะนั้นวันนี้เราจะลองฟังดูนะครับว่ามาเมืองไทยแล้วเห็นแล้วเนี่ยเขาคิดอย่างไรนะครับเกี่ยวกับ Constructionism ของเรามันเหมือนหรือมันต่างนะครับกับของต่างประเทศอย่างไรบ้างฉะนั้นวันนี้นะครับเรามีสองท่านนะครับที่เข้ามาร่วมแล้วก็คือท่านอาจารย์ Debbie Fields นะครับก็เป็น Associate Research Professor นะครับที่มหาวิทยาลัยยูทาห์สเตทอเมริกานะครับแล้วก็มีเปาโลนะครับบลิกสไตน์นะครับเป็น Associate Professor เหมือนกันนะครับจาก Teachers College ที่ Columbia University ในนิวยอร์กสหรัฐอเมริกา so hello Paulo
Hello. Hello.
hello Debbie
Hi.
so
Swadika.
it's very nice to have you two here. I've just introduced to our listeners that today we're going to talk about how constructionism is in Thailand in a perspective of people from outside. So just before we start, can you talk a little bit about how both of you became involved in the project in Thailand and ended up doing this research? Paulo.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, very nice to be talking to you, Roger, and to everyone there in Thailand. So Thailand is a country that's very close to my heart. When I was doing my PhD at MIT, my master's at MIT, Roger Arnon was doing his PhD at MIT, and so we met there, and I started working in Thailand. Back then, many years ago, and then when I went to do my PhD, and then I started teaching at Stanford, we started a 5-year project with Thailand, trying to do research on constructionism in Thailand and bring new ideas and bring the maker movement to Thai schools. And so it's been about 15 years that I've been connected to Thailand and doing work in Thailand, and it has been a really exciting time for me.
Mm-hmm. And you, Debbie?
So I first encountered all this when I went to the Constructionism conference in Thailand a couple of years ago.
Right.
And so I was really impressed with the work at Darun Sikalai School. And then I went to the homestay, the extra conference homestay in Bansamka village, and I got to know Roger a little bit more, and Tukta and Sinuan and Nok. And I guess after that, I just started finding excuses to come to Thailand and do some workshops. And then that led to this opportunity to do research and get to know the whole community so much better.
Wow, okay. Sounds great. So you've known Thailand for a little bit, and I know that you've collected a lot of data. You've interviewed a lot of key persons, Debbie, and I think, and you've also published a paper as well. And so you've done a lot of thinking about, what's going on in Thailand. Up front, what do you think is so unique about Thailand in the way that constructionism happened? Any of you?
Trying to see who wants to talk first. I think that one of the most unique things about what's happening in Thailand is the way that people have tried it to apply constructionism not just in schools and education, but across the spectrum. So in the West, there's a lot of work trying to do constructionism, particularly in K-12 schools, right, pre-college, and maybe a little bit at university. But I'm not very familiar with many other efforts to do constructionism in industry and business, and especially not in villages or just general society. And so I think that's an amazing idea to take a learning theory and try to transform culture in socially just ways through this learning theory. And so I find the application of it really interesting. And I think it's led to a lot of creative work that the rest of the world can learn from.
And So I agree with all of that Debbie said, and I just want to add that I think it's very unique that Thailand has been doing this for so long, and I don't know any other country that has. Even in the U.S., there are like ups and downs, and projects that start and then they stop, and then 5 years later people start again. But in Thailand, there is this kind of continuity of in the constructionist community that's really impressive to me, and also like a very, very strong leadership from Kun Peron, being a real champion of constructionism in Thailand, and in a very unique way, because it's not just importing ideas from the outside, it's really combining ideas from the outside with ideas that are already present in the Thai culture. So I think these two things, the time and this rich combination of external and internal ideas, I think that's a very unique thing about how constructionism is happening in Thailand.
Okay, so there are other countries that have tried constructionism in a similar way, right? So why do you think it has lasted so long in Thailand? Other countries are still doing, of course, but maybe in a different way. But you've mentioned specifically that Thailand seems to have continuity, like 20-something years. And so why do you think it's still here? Because MIT people came for only the first few years.
Yeah. So I'll just try a little comment on this. I think one important thing is the leadership of Kun Peron. I think that's a really important component. And unfortunately, there are very few leaders worldwide that are this committed to, first of all, helping education in their own countries. And second, helping education in a very specific way, which is not education as just to kind of train people for the job market or train people for a particular profession or skill, but it's really to empower people to be full citizens in the world, and to find their own passions and to be the best versions of themselves. So I think looking at education as not just a professional skill, but a way to empower people, to emancipate people, is really rare, especially in business leaders and national leaders. And I think Thailand is lucky to have the leadership of conference for all those years. I think also it seems to be to me that there was something very there was a lot of the reception of constructionism in Thailand was very special. It seems like people were kind of waiting for some kind of philosophy of education that was about empowerment, that was about like giving power back to students. And it seems like that constructionism really met that need or that thirst for some kind of more different ways of looking at education. And then everybody involved in it got really passionate and kept doing it for a long time. And I think the last thing is, like, it's not, there is the leadership of Kun Peron, but there is some very incredible people doing it in the villages, in the companies. So there is this extended team that is extremely talented and that is extremely persistent too.
Right.
I think I would add two things to that. All those things are absolutely important. And then the other thing that's come out, especially as I interview people, both leaders and then just everyday people who are trying to use constructionism, is that the people who really have deeply encountered it, their lives are transformed. And so they're thinking about, how do I apply this, not just in one area of my life, but they're thinking about, how do I apply it in my family? Well, how do I apply it to a new problem, right? And they're introducing it to others. And so it's spreading in a really authentic way, because if your life is transformed, then you're your own advertisement for how powerful this idea can be. And I think the second thing I would add is that there's been a lot of deep mentorship over extended periods of time. So it's really difficult to change viewpoints about how we see the world, about how we see ourselves. And yet if you're adapting constructionism, you're learning, well, it's not just being told what to do. Like I need to own that and kind of figure out and test and reflect on what to do and try things and verify if they're working and then try it again. And in interviewing people, I found that, some people would have years of mentorship from different leaders, maybe Dr. Suchin or maybe Sinuan or other people, right? And I think that deep mentorship, so if you get stuck and you're not sure how to apply it, you have someone to talk it over with and maybe some key resources to help you be unstuck. And then a new situation comes and you can figure out how to apply it in that new situation. So I think that deep mentorship and the life transformation are two key factors that have come out in Thailand.
Okay, it sounds like that's in a way, that's the essence of constructionism, right? You internalize, you try to make sense of what you're doing by yourself, and then you have mentorship from others. So the process of building constructionism in Thailand is very constructionist. So did we get it right? I mean, is there, because the question I always get, especially when I just came back from MIT, people come up to me and say, so what's constructionism? You've been with Papert. Did we get it right? Are we doing it right in Thailand? Are we the same or different from others? So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really interesting question. I think there is no doing it right in constructionism in a way, because it depends so much on which pieces of it are important to your culture, to your country, to your values, and all of that. That I think Debbie can say, she has wonderful examples of how this kind of combination of things has taken place. But I think in general, especially in the last 20 years, like everywhere in the world, people have been started. I mean, every country has, a very similar educational systems. If you look at how it's roughly organized, it's like lots of lecturing, lots of tests, lots of memorization, all those traditional things. And I think in the last 30 years or 20 years, in many countries, people have started thinking, I mean, this is really not serving us anymore. Like, kids are not interested in this. They have tons of other distractions. This is not even training people to get, the jobs in the future. The jobs are disappearing and changing and all of that. So I think everywhere people are like looking for this answer, like what do we do with our educational system in the 21st century? Because things are changing so fast. And I think, Thailand found one answer. Of course, there's a lot of work to do and, we need to kind of scale up. But I think Thailand found one answer. And in constructionism, which is, it's about, as I said before, empowerment and giving power back to the students and all of that. But I think Thailand did it in a very special way that's very in sync with values that Thai people care about and all of that. So I think every time you do it in a way that is respectful to your culture, to your values, to your ideas, to your communities, you're sort of doing it right? I think the wrong way would be to say, ask Seymour Papert to write a manual and then say, okay, this is the Bible of constructionism. Let's do exactly what Seymour Papert told us. And I think the Thai people took a very different strategy, and I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Paula said is absolutely hitting the point on the head of it's you have to figure out what's authentic for each person and in each context. I think where it would go wrong is if you said, this is how you do constructionism and it's the only way, right? So if it's like a rubber stamp and you're saying, well, you can only do constructionism in this way, then that would be problematic, because constructionism is learning by doing and learning by making in ways that are respectful to people and help them to own their learning. And so if you're giving the people the ability and helping them to think through, well, what's a problem I need to solve? Or what's this thing I need to do? What's this new farming technique I want to try? Or what's this project I need to make in school? Or those sorts of things. And you're helping them think through it, try something, and iterate on it, then I think that's really the key. And that's what we've seen happening, but in many different ways in Thailand. And it's been really fun to study all those different ways.
Okay. Yes, Paolo?
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's, if you think historically, for 4,000 years, human life was a lot about everybody should be the same way, right? So you have like one religion, one state, one government. Everybody has to be the same way, believe in the same things, do the same things, and education was to make sure everybody would be exactly the same, right? And if you dare to be different, you would be outcast, or you'd be punished in most societies. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we live in a time where we are allowed to pursue our own intellectual and passions. So if I want to be a professor, I can be a professor. If I want to be an artist, I can be an artist. If I want to be a soccer player, and this is so new, because not long ago, people, if you want to marry a certain person, you couldn't, because that was not allowed. If you want a certain profession, you can't, because you were destined to a certain profession. And if you wanted to think differently, you couldn't, because we all think the same way. And so it's a wonder. We are like wonderfully lucky to live in a time that's a tiny piece of human history where we can be whatever we want, and we can have a type of education that helps with that helps you find your inner truth, and that helps you find what you really like. And I think that's exactly what Constructionism in Thailand is doing. And I think it's a really wonderful thing that we can present to our children, a world full of possibilities. And I think that would be a great thing for Thailand too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about the paper that you've published. In that paper, the title is "What is Constructionism? Views from a Thai Perspective." Right. So there are a couple things that you've mentioned in the paper. For example, there are 4 key aspects that you said emerged from all the data that you have collected. I'll just list them here quickly, and then I'll let you talk a little bit about them, basically, which ones you think are most interesting and relevant to you. So the first one is control over one's own learning. Right? The second is the focus on real-world problems. The third is the role of digital technology. And the last one is life-altering impact of constructionism. So, I'm Thai, so I'm very interested to hear that, when someone from outside comes in and talks to, the community, and they've summarized the interesting things that first emerged from this data. You picked these 4. So maybe each of you can talk a little bit about, these 4 things, and, what might be the most intriguing thing about Thailand for you.
Well, as I mentioned before, what I think has been one of the key things that has helped sustain Thailand, in addition to some really amazing leaders who are pushing this forward, is this life transformation, which is really connected to control over one's own learning. So those are 2 of the themes in the paper. And I talk about control over one's own learning because that is what Thai people said so much when I was interviewing them, is that they felt different than before, that they were responsible for their own learning, could choose to learn something new, and then if it didn't work, it wasn't the end, right? So there was a lot of, it doesn't work, and now I reflect. So a lot of people would say, think, do, reflect again. And when I talked to people about putting into action, they were also saying, yes, well, I tried this, it didn't work so well the first time, so now I did this. Or a village council saying, we tried this one time, yeah, In fact, I had one village council tell me that they tried something and it failed, but that was the favorite moment that they wanted to tell me because they felt like they would try again. They learned from the experience. And that's amazing to have that level of perseverance and then to feel like, okay, well, maybe not just in your farm or maybe not just in your business or not just in your classroom, but throughout other parts of your life, you could also take that idea of being in control of your own learning, because we learn everywhere. It's foundational to who we are as humans. And so to feel like you can take control over that was really impressive. And I think in the West, in just a contrast, because it's largely only been applied in classrooms or maybe in maker spaces, like things that say education, well, this is education. Because of that, people don't always think about taking those ideas outside. Whereas I felt like in Thailand, I was frequently hearing people talk about things and then applying it to some other area of their lives. And that is like an educator's dream world. It's like, whoa, we're always trying to get people to do that. So it's been really fun to ask around and find out how this is happening and that it's important to constructionism in Thailand.
So it sounds like Thailand can inspire other countries, right? With these examples.
They've inspired me. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great story that Daddy was telling, and so just to quickly talk about one other of those items. I think in many countries, when you work with like problem-solving kind of curricula, so you tell kids, let's solve a problem using some kind of technologies, robotics, whatever. A lot of times, children, they don't have any problems, or they have problems that are not real problems. For example, I feel lazy about turning off the lights in my bedroom, so I want a robot that will go and turn off the lights, right? I mean, it's an interesting project, but it's not exactly going to improve the lives of thousands of people, right? And I think in Thailand, the focus has been so much on real world problems, so real things that can actually improve people's lives. So not this kind of frivolous problems of, I don't want to get out of bed to do something, but really like, okay, let's fix the irrigation system in this village. Let's fix, a problem in our cities, in our communities and all of that. And I think if you compare to what happens in the US, for example, you see a lot of robotics competitions or robotics workshops at school in American schools, where people are just doing very kind of meaningless projects. And I think Thailand is showing that, doing important projects that can help people is not only possible, but you see a lot more engagement, a lot more learning. And so I think this concern about real world problems and real life problems was really striking for me.
Okay.
I'm going to add two more things to that. Relate directly what Paula was just saying. So this focus on real world problems, a lot of that comes from an emphasis on community, right? So anybody who's listening to this, you guys are at the, this group gathering about constructionism. And I know that one big reason that you're there is because you care about your communities and you care about Thailand as a community. I think that's been part of the ethos of constructionism in Thailand. And in the West, it's really famous for us, right? We tend to focus on individual things. And so that's part of, the real world problems are often connected to community. The other thing I think that is really unique and is part of this life-altering aspect of constructionism is the way that Thai people have integrated emotional and spiritual aspects into their practice of constructionism. So in the West, we barely acknowledge emotions in education or in our theories of learning. And so it's coming up, but I feel like I can turn, when I'm working with my own graduate students, I can turn to some of the examples that I'm seeing in Thailand. It's like, hey, here's how people have used meditation to help support emotions so that they can accept constructive criticism and move forward, right? And then the ways that people have integrated that with spirituality. I think that connects to community. So community, emotions, and spirituality it's not that they're completely absent from the West, but they're not very well emphasized. And so I think because they're being so well emphasized in Thailand, it's another place to bring it into conversation with how we practice constructionism out elsewhere.
Wow. What about the role of digital technology? In the paper, it seems to imply that a lot of Thai people don't think that technology is needed to do constructionism. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think that might be, maybe the most controversial thing we might talk about. But I think in the West, a lot of times when people talk about digital technologies in schools, technology kind of takes over. So people say, yes, we need to, we need community, we need to train teachers, we need to write new curricula. But really what they do is like buy lots of technology and put in schools. And it normally doesn't work because technology, in a technology implementation, the technology itself is the easiest part. The really hard part is to get people to learn how to use it, to integrate technology in what they do and to use it well. And so I feel that in the West, a lot of times people are very technocentric. They focus on buying computers, buying tablets, buying Lego kits and all of that, and not so much in what happens after. So I think, I was glad to see that in Thailand, they care a lot more about teachers and community and all of those things, and not so much about the technology itself. But I think we should always remember that even with those concerns, and this is comes from Papert, is that technology at some point it has a really important part, which is empowering people to do more than what they could do without the technology, right? So we think about without a pencil, you can't really write. So you can only communicate by voice, right? So the pencil or the writing is a technology that enables you to do more, to be more than you would otherwise. And digital technologies, it's the same. So if you can build a robot, there's no substitution for that. Like, how can you build a robot without technologies? And the robot is not just because it's something cool or technological, but you're trying to express ideas by building a robot. You're trying to express ideas by writing a computer program. And you're sharing those ideas with other people and all of that. So I do think that technologies broadly conceived are important in education because they help us express ideas, exchange ideas, put ideas in the word and see if they work or not and all of that. But I don't think it has necessarily to be the first step or the main step. And so I think that's one of the developments that I think will be really interesting in years to come in Thailand.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the key is if you're using technology, you want to empower people to do things with it, to create with it, to solve problems with it. So if it's relevant to a problem that you have, maybe it's some farming sort of thing, maybe it's making digital maps and engineering diagrams that help you with water resources. Maybe it's something in school, right? So I do a lot of work in my professional life about helping kids learn to code because it is a really helpful skill that's useful for so many things. So then it's important. But it doesn't have to be. You can make stuff and solve problems without technology too. And so I think it's like if, what people were saying in the interviews was that if you're only thinking about constructionism in digital technology, that's not necessarily so. Seymour Papert said that himself, right? You could be making sandcastles, you could be making theories of the universe, and that was also constructionism. You're still creating something. You're still creating an idea or a theory or a thing. So I met someone in one village who's a weaver, and then she would go to other places and figure out how other crafting techniques, and then she would apply it herself. So that's constructionism in practice, right? And then she would use that in her own art and her own work. So I think technology can be an absolutely powerful tool, an application of constructionism, and sometimes it can be a way to discover how constructionism works because it disrupts everything. You're not used to using this cool technology, and it puts you in an experience where you're like, oh, I'm learning differently. Oh, and this is a type of learning that I can do elsewhere. So it can be powerful for that. But if we think constructionism only happens where we're using digital technology, then that's problematic. Does that make sense, Roger?
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I think, just one quick thing. If you think about just a metaphor or an analogy, before we had, if you want to do an art class, before we had industrialized paint and paintbrushes, right? You'd have to go to the woods and get some like rocks and grind the rocks and make your own paint and take hairs from the horses and make your own paintbrushes. So it would be so complicated that it would be impossible to do it in schools, because it would take 5 hours just to make your own paints, right? When we came up with this technology to actually produce in paints and sell them in boxes and in paintbrushes, and so we empowered kids to create art without having to worry about making their own paints, going to the woods, whatever. So there is that role as well of technologies empowering kids to focus on the core part of a given activity. For example, in painting, it's actually painting, maybe not making your own paints. So technologies, they have that role too of making some activities easier so that they can be done in the context of schools. And I think think about robotics, for example. 15 years ago, it was impossible because you would need so much knowledge and so many components and all of that. And we made it simple. So now you can, with $50, do robotics in schools. And so I think another role of technology is also to bring all those interesting activities to the reach of kids in schools.
Thank you. Okay. So as we're running out of time now, one last question. It seems like there's a lot of good things that has happened out of the Thailand work. We've heard a lot of praises. What about opportunities to improve? What do you think, being someone from the outside, what would be some of your thoughts on things that the people in Thailand can learn from the West, or what we can do to, keep improving and keep things going in Thailand?
I think one thing would be to take what has made it work so well so far and keep on going with that. And that takes a tremendous amount of perseverance. So when I talked about deep mentorship, that was taking place over multiple years. And it's really hard not to give up during that time, right? And not everyone's willing to persevere with it that long, but I saw, for instance, in some villages, maybe it started with one person, but they were given assistance to not give up, to keep going, to think through new problems. And it doesn't mean telling people what to do. That's the key, is that the best mentors that people talked about didn't tell people, oh, you need to do this or you need to do this. But they would talk through with them, okay, well, what problem are you facing? How can we approach this in a constructionist way? What resources do you need that maybe you don't have the knowledge of or the resources for? What's that little bit that I can help you with? But not telling people, because if you tell people, you've just ruined it, right? So I think that. And I think that needs to happen at a lot of places. So in villages, in schools, it's really so easy to get caught up in, here's a good educational model, now everyone do it, right? Whereas if you're empowering teachers to say, well, here are some ideas, how can you apply them? And help them to figure out how to do it in their context. But then meet with them and give them help so that they don't get too discouraged. And things probably won't go perfectly the first time. They certainly don't go perfectly for me. So I think that mentorship is something that I would really encourage to keep happening, and maybe to train some more mentors. So it's one thing to learn how to apply constructionism yourself. It's different to try to help someone else do it, because you can't tell them the answers, and it's so hard not to tell them the answers. And so that's what I'm trying to do too. I'm trying not to say, oh, here's the solution to keep it going. I'm trying to say, here are some things that I have observed from you guys talking to me about what helps things keep going. And I'm saying, okay, mentorship, you might want to pay real close attention to that, and then not telling people answers. And I think maybe the other thing is, I think some of the meetings that you guys are doing, where you're figuring out, sharing ideas, creating that community where you can hear what other people are doing, be encouraged, maybe get some ideas maybe you're stuck and you need some help thinking things through, talking about that. And doing that at every level. So if you're working in a business, do that with the CEOs and the middle managers and the lower industrial people, right? So if everyone is thinking about how to do it and not just one person or not just the CEO or not just the middle manager, or in a village, not just the village leader, not just the farmers, not just the kids, right? But if everyone is starting to figure out and then talking with each other, then I think that will lead to some of the organizational change that I think you guys are working towards. But also to remember that life transformation is perhaps one of the most powerful things I've seen in Thailand. And don't give up on that. That is, I think, the true heritage of what's happening, because these are people, and most of you who are probably listening to this you are those people. You are applying this in areas that no one else would have thought of and no one else has access to. And I think that is where things really will continue.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that Debbie just said, and I think it's really important to this idea of we have to keep going and keeping doing this yearly conferences and keep building community and all of that, because it's easy after a while. People get tired and they say, oh, what about let's do something else, let's see what's out there, and I think keeping at it and supporting people that are doing it well and expanding this group, and it's really important, because I think that our role here is exactly to look at what's happening in Thailand and to tell you, is this a good thing? Is there a future for this? And I guess everyone can tell that the answer is yes. Like, this is amazing work that's going on, and it has real potential to transform lives. It's already transformed lives, in lots of places. And but it's really hard after a while, after 15 years, 20 years, to keep a community going. But it is exactly those communities that keep going that achieve the most. And of course, you have to be in the right direction. But I think in our opinion and many other people's opinions, it's a great direction that Thailand is going and construction is going. And I think the other big challenge is to say, okay, now how do we make this happen to more people in Thailand? So what about the kids in public schools that have traditional education and no access to all of these new ideas? What about the other companies that are not within the Constructionism community? So how do we expand this group? And I guess, again, I'll go back to what Debbie said. There is, in education, just like in healthcare or other areas like this, there is no magic way of scaling up. It's not like producing, cars or sausages, or that you can just crank the machine, crank up the machines and produce faster. In education, things are slow, they are painful, they require a lot of effort, a lot of persistence, and they scale slowly. But when they scale, it's really transformative. So I think thinking about how to reach more people, but to do it in a reasoned way, using good science and good research, and accepting the fact that it's slow. But if you plan from the beginning, maybe in 10 years or 20 years, Thailand can be a world leader in doing this in public education. And but it's really important to understand that not everything is immediately scalable. But I believe that the patience and the persistence that Thailand has shown gives me a lot of hope that you'll be able to also expand this in a very smart, very meaningful way, and will empower millions of children and adults all over Thailand.
Okay, so well, I think that's enough to get the discussion started on the Thailand side. And so thank you very much for spending time with us today, Debbie, Paulo. And I'm sure it's just the beginning. We will continue our work, so we will hear more from you in the near future. Okay, so
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.